Hey, there, it's me, Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access. Link in the comment, thanks. Thursday, July 30th. I dreamed again last night. Sarah, on her crutches and wearing bright red lipstick, gave me, Annie, a long, delicious kiss. Then Kelly, wearing bright red lipstick, gave me another. Things blurred. I turned and looked in a mirror. I was on crutches and had only one leg. I was covered with scars. I was trying to turn around to look at the girls again, but I stumbled on my crutches and fell. Then I woke up, bolted upright, the top of my yellow nightgown covered in sweat. After my breathing returned to normal, I got up and went in to wash. If I had finished turning around in my dream, would Sarah and Kelly have been healed? I hoped so, but I guess I would never know for sure. I wore my yellow shorts and top today, and took Sarah over for physical therapy. I felt a little more comfortable in Kevin's presence today, and again we enjoyed the water therapy with Sarah and Roger Cameron. We had to be back at Hope Haven at noon, because Reverend McGrail, Saint Barbara of the Holy McGrail, as I jokingly call her, had made arrangements to take us to lunch. I was a bit surprised when she took us to her house, rather than to a restaurant, but she wanted us to be comfortable in talking without worrying about anyone overhearing. We had delicious burritos, and we updated her on everything that had happened recently. She led us into discussing all the transitions we would be making, Sarah Beth back to her home environment and school, and me back to my masculine role. She assured us that we both had the inner strength to deal with whatever problems may come. We talked about our future plans, and our hopes of coming here for school. Please come here for school, the minister insisted. And please come to my church. You will both have a very good friend here waiting for you, me. On our way back, she looked at us appraisingly, and said, Annie. Mark, Julie, you've been through a lot over the past few months, and I don't think that anything is going to stop you from having a full, joyous life together. Mark, you went along with Sarah and Julie's plan and have lived as Annie all this time. I imagine you're looking forward to being Mark again. Yes, ma'am, I responded. You've received a very special gift, she told me. You've experienced life from a totally different perspective. Now you haven't had a period or gotten pregnant, but other than that, you've really become Annie. Even if you never put on Annie's clothes again, that experience will change you, for the better, I think. You will always have Annie with you, in the way you relate to other people, and in the way you love Sarah Beth and she loves you. She chuckled. Sorry. End of sermon. Occupational hazard. But God bless you both. After we got back, Sarah rested and I went down and played with some of the younger kids for a few minutes. I wondered if I could have related to them as easily if I had been Mark. I hoped that I would. When I saw that Sarah was still sleeping soundly, I kissed her cheek, changed into my bicycling gear, and taped the red and blue ribbons to the pink helmet one last time. I called Roberta's room at the hospital and asked her mother if Roberta could get out of bed to look out the window. Her mom said she could, so I asked for her to watch for me on the street and sidewalk that they could see from her room. Then I went out, after inviting the younger kids to watch me as I showed off, then I went down the block and across the street, and did a few laps, jumps, and twirls, streamers trailing behind, and looking up and waving. After that, I went down to the river walk to get some exercise and to think through all that had happened, and how I had changed. Yes, I wanted to go back to being Mark. But like my friend the minister had said, I will always have Annie with me. After I returned, Sarah was awake. I discussed an idea with her, she agreed, and so after supper I took her over to Roberta's room. I had changed back into my regular clothes, but I put on the pink helmet and the ribbons for my trip over. Annie. Roberta squealed in delight. I saw you. I saw you. You were silly. Hi, Sarah. We talked a bit. I told Sarah that we would be going home soon, but that we would come back when she got her new heart. Remember what I said about you being able to ride a bike someday? I asked. She nodded. Well, I have a present for you. You can have this helmet and these ribbons. Sarah Beth unclipped the ribbons from my wig and fastened them to the tiny girl's hair. I placed the helmet on, and it went down over her nose. It doesn't fit now, but someday it will. And all good bicycle riders know how important it is to wear a helmet. I have another one at home, but this one can be yours. Okay? And when you're a big girl and can ride for miles and miles, you can remember silly old Annie. She nodded and smiled. Thank you, silly old Annie. I love you. I love you, too, Roberta. Friday, July 31st. Once again, last night, I dreamed I was in front of the church. This time I was the groom, though. I was waiting in front of the church with the other members of the wedding party for Sarah Beth to come in on her father's arm. I glanced out and saw Joan Kim, smiling. I tried to wave at her and noticed that I still had on the acrylic blue nails, but they were even longer this time. And the best man and groomsman had long acrylic nails, too, but different colors. Then I just stood there forever, waiting for Sarah. Was she back there? Was she even alive? I panicked at the thought, and woke up. As I lay there in bed, sweating, I figured that the nails were part of my dream because I'm having them removed tomorrow afternoon. My panic about Sarah must have been caused because of the conference this afternoon, where they give the results of the latest tests and give long-term projections. When I put on my Minnie Mouse t-shirt and pink shorts this morning, I remembered that it was what I wore when I started this journal. Now I'm near the end. I had to promise Sarah Beth that I would change clothes at noon to look more presentable for the conference at 1:30. The Holdings are coming to be there, and to stay over so they can bring us home tomorrow. The longest 6 week of our lives is almost over. I can be a guy again. After breakfast, we hugged Kelly. Goodbye. Mrs. Cameron was going to take her to the bus station. In PT, Kevin taught us some exercises and activities to help Sarah when we returned home. I would continue to work with her as her healing partner. The Holdings arrived in PT before we left. As I was ready to leave PT, I started to hug Kevin, then remembered how uncomfortable he was with my being a boy living as a girl. So I extended my hand. Thanks, Kevin, for everything. I appreciate all your work and your understanding, too. You've given me a whole new way of seeing things, and maybe even a goal in my life. Kevin smiled a tight little smile. Annie, I'm glad to be there for both of you. But this isn't. Goodbye. I'll see you at the conference this afternoon. The Holdings drove us out to lunch. Since Julie had taken her car back, we hadn't gotten very far away from Hope Haven, except with the Camerons. As we ate our burgers, we had enough privacy to talk. Mr. Holdings said, I guess I'll start having to call you Mark again, right? I smiled. Yes, sir. But maybe you should wait until tomorrow. If something slips this afternoon, we could put Sarah Beth's conference in an uproar. Right. Annie. When you kids came up with the idea of you coming to be with Sarah, I didn't know what to think. I wasn't sure at all that it would work out, or that you could hold up under the pressure. But if you hadn't, I don't know what we would have done. We felt guilty that we couldn't be there for Sarah Beth in this terrible time. It's okay, Daddy. I understand, Sarah said, as she reached for her father's hand. But you pulled it off, and that's what counts. His eyes teared up. So, thanks. God bless you, kid. And I'll try real hard not to call you Annie after tomorrow, okay? We talked a while longer, catching them up on some of the happenings lately, and how some of the kids have become such close friends. Sarah Beth and I changed clothes after lunch as we had planned. The conference with the staff was in a large meeting room. We were all nervous as we found chairs. The oncologist, a chemo nurse, Mrs. Verdugo, and Kevin sat around the table with us. It was good news. The scans and blood work showed no new signs of cancer, said the doctor. They recommended one more round of chemotherapy that would begin in mid-September, but this round wouldn't be as strong, and she could receive it on an outpatient basis at a Fort Russell hospital. You'll have hair by Christmas, the chemo nurse announced with a smile. A crew cut, maybe, but that's better than nothing, right? Right, Sarah grinned. Sarah had worked hard enough at physical therapy that she was ready to go to school again, Kevin explained. He told again how she might want to use a wheelchair for long-distance travel and quick trips between classes, but the more work she could give her leg, the better. It was Mrs. Verdugo's turn. I'll say in front of you what I said to them privately earlier. I had my doubts about two teenagers being healing partners. But they were both fine residents, and Annie has this marvelous way of being a healing partner to everybody she meets, not just Sarah. Then she looked at me. Annie, I really hope that you will continue your education and enter a helping profession. You have so much to offer sick children, especially. Many other young people have trouble relating to those who have devastating illnesses, and make them feel uncomfortable. That's not you, though. I wish that I could keep you. I wish that I could stop blushing. I was totally surprised when the doctor in charge said, there are two other members of the healing team we haven't heard from. Annie, you are Sarah Beth's healing partner. What would you like to tell us about your experiences in that role, and what's your evaluation of Sarah Beth? If only I could say everything I felt. I stammered a bit, but then got started. I want to thank everybody for all those wonderful things I've been hearing. I keep thinking you're talking about somebody else. Everybody chuckled. Sarah Beth's eyes went wide and she held back a big giggle. That did have a double meaning, didn't it? I really wanted to do this for Sarah Beth, to be her healing partner, and it's brought us so very close together. Yet in a lot of ways, I think she's been more help to me than I have been to her. She's helped me grow up a lot. She's helped me see things in a new way. I noticed that the Holdings, Kevin, and Sarah Beth all seemed to be biting their lips. More double meanings. I'd better start acting like Julie again. Well, anyway, I had planned to start college this summer, and I feel like I've been in college, because I've learned so much from everybody about health, and cancer, and our bodies, and stress, and courage. I've always thought I was the stronger sister, being an athlete and all. And I agreed to be her healing partner because I was afraid she couldn't stand up under all those bad things that happened to her, that maybe I could give her some strength. But do you know what? She's been stronger than me. I guess she's needed to be. She's had her moments, some crying, some blue days, some anger, and that's good, the counselor tells us. But every day, whether she feels like it or not, she gets up, works hard at doing things that are so simple for all the rest of us, and works her butt off in therapy, sorry, Kevin, and then goes to get her dose of poison in chemo. Sorry, ma'am, I said to the chemo nurse. Anyway, I'm astonished by her, I'm proud of her, and I love her more than I ever did. And I'm glad you all were on her team. I had to quit, because I was bawling. So was Sarah Beth. The group seemed comfortable waiting for us to regain our composure. Then they asked if Sarah Beth had anything to say. Not really, she gulped. I never was comfortable being the center of attention. But you've all been so good to me. Just thanks, I guess. She took my hand and looked into my eyes. And Annie, I love you more than ever, too. We were all feeling upbeat at all the good news and affirmation. The meeting broke up. As I stepped into the hallway, Kevin pulled me aside. "Can Annie catch up with you all later?" he asked the Holdings. They nodded. "Now what?" We sat down in 2 sticky plastic chairs under the window at the end of the hall. "Annie, I was really upset when I found out about your little fraud," he began. I cringed. "But in the past few days, I've heard time and again about how wonderful you were to other people here, and how much they'll miss you. My wife's best friend works in the cardiac care unit, and she and her husband were over for cards the other night. She asked if I knew the Holding girls. I said yes. She said how she appreciated the 2 of you visiting Roberta and cheering her up. She told how Roberta's mother said that you were such good friends to the both of them when they were still at Hope Haven. And Mrs. Verdugo keeps telling little stories of you being the chief of morale over there. And Mrs. Cameron told me that Annie kept Roger from just giving up. You really have this gift for relating to people who are sick or disabled, without patronizing them or pitying them. Do you work this well with people when you're a guy?" he asked. Well, I guess in my Annie role I had fewer inhibitions in relating to people. But since the most important person in my life is disabled, I'm sure that my attitude would be the same, no matter what I was wearing. What was he getting at? I wondered as I spoke. Tell me again about your grades. I told him. And what science courses you've taken. I did. And I'm right in remembering that you would need a lot of financial aid to go to college. I agreed. You have a great future in physical therapy. What did you say your real name was? Mark. Mark, and the university here has the only solid program in that area in our state. Get your applications to school when you get back home and write me. I'll send you applications for work scholarship and you'll have my endorsement. I closed my eyes and gasped. We both stood. I started to reach my hands out, then dropped them. Kevin, the Mark in me is holding back, but Annie really wants to hug you. Is that okay? He smiled and nodded. We hugged. When I caught up with the Holdings in the Hope Haven living room, they were visiting with the Camerons. They were ready to fly back to the ranch for a long weekend, so they were doing farewells. I leaned over and kissed Roger's cheek and took his hand. Sadly, one side of his face seemed to be drooping more. Roger, I'll never forget the dates we had. You're a wonderful guy and I'm going to keep on praying that you will get well, and soon. If we come back to Hope Haven for a visit, can I come see you? I knew I was setting myself up for another time as Annie, but it was worth it if I made that much difference to Roger's morale. He shook his head. Nah, it's okay. I'll really miss you, Annie, but you don't need to come see me again. I was a bit surprised, but I just hugged him again. Whatever you think best, Roger. But I'll miss you, too. As I finished, I noticed Mrs. Cameron motioning me with her head. I slipped away from Roger and followed her to the porch. Mrs. Cameron was very controlled as she spoke, afraid that she might lose control if she let any emotion show. Annie, what you did for Roger was priceless. He's such a good boy, but he's always felt so alone, poor little rich kid, and all that. Thank you for being his friend, and thank you for letting me play fairy godmother with you for the evening out. I will never forget you. She paused. He isn't responding well to the treatments, you know. The doctors are going to upgrade to the strongest protocol they can use, but they have little hope. Roger knows this. If there is no sign of turnaround in the next 2 weeks, we will just take him home and keep him as comfortable as we can until. He is just so brave. He knows that he is going to deteriorate physically, and then mentally. The reason he didn't accept your gracious offer to come see him again is that he wants you to remember him as he is now, not how he is likely to become over the next few months. When the time comes, though, I do want you, both you and Sarah, and your parents too, if they can, to come to Cameron for Roger's funeral. Don't worry about clothes, Roger loves you in that maroon skirt and blouse, and wants you to wear that. And we'll give you enough advance warning to get ready, and send our company plane up to get you. Would you come? Please? By this time, my tears were flowing. Yes, of course, it would be our honor. Since we're here, I'll tell you now what I will tell Sarah in a few minutes. Our lawyers are working on the scholarship fund that I had mentioned earlier. Although it can't be all my decision, which means I can't promise anything, but I do hope Sarah Beth will apply. She has the grace and potential to do great things, and I would like to help her achieve her educational goals. Oh, by the way, I encouraged your friend Kelly to apply as well. She didn't finish high school after her accident, but if she gets her GED this year, she might join you here at the university. Of course, she wants to be in ranch management. And we could always use people of her strength and determination at our place. She looked at her watch. I'm sorry, but we must go. Thank you again for being here, and for being Annie. I flinched a little. When she thanked me for being Annie, did that mean she knew I really wasn't Annie? After all, she might have run a security check on me. Nah. Then I remembered that in a little over an hour, Sarah Beth and I had both seen our educational futures fall into place. Neither Kevin or Mrs. C could make promises, but it did look good. We walked in, and I said goodbye to other Hope Haven friends who would be leaving for the weekend and miss our departure tomorrow. We went out for dinner with the Holdings. Sarah didn't eat much, because she was still queasy from chemotherapy, but we still had a great evening, especially when I told them about Sarah's scholarship possibility. Please subscribe for the next part. And visit my Patreon page for early access.